Okay, thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, a BPM success story about one gas. So today we're going to hear from a few speakers, and we're going to engage in an interactive dialogue and then actually see a demo. First up will be Bruce Hardy. Bruce is a longtime professional in the BPM space. He's president of Solutions BPM, who are responsible for the deployment of the case study that we're going to see. He's had clients throughout North America, working across a number of industries and being involved in both IT and business transformation for well over 2 decades. Bruce, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Nathaniel.
It's our pleasure. And we'll also be joined by Craig Brownlee. Craig today is the owner and principal engineer for Craig Brownlee Physical Engineering, a consulting firm that deals with operations and regulatory compliance in the pipeline industry. But for over 3 decades, he held roles with Oklahoma Natural Gas, One OK, and One Gas, who the case study is about today, including the role of chief engineer. His experience goes across both the workforce and business side, as well as dealing with innovation on the application of BPM. And Craig was instrumental in the case study that we're about to discuss. So, Craig, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And lastly, just to talk a bit about the One Gas case study. One Gas is a Fortune 200 company that has over 3,000 employees, a third of which, so over 1,000 employees today, now actually using the BPM solution that we're going to be talking about. We were really impressed with the metrics that were provided on this case study. One was the reduction of the average billing time by almost 2/3, from 66 to 26 days. And the other, which was really an extraordinary shift, was the reduction of the maximum billing time from over 2 years to which was 818 days down to 125 days. And then the increased average collection amount, which increased by almost 300% from just over $300 to well over $1,100. So the transformation that One Gas has gone through has been extraordinary, and it's one that has been driven by a foundation of BPM. The specific technology underlying that we're actually going to see a demo of from PNMsoft, and specifically from James Luxford, their CTO. But first, let's get into some actual questions about the case study. So, Craig, I think I'd like to start with you. If you wouldn't mind just kicking it off by talking about your background a little more and talking about your role in the pipeline industry in North America.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a registered professional engineer. I've spent the last more than 30 years in the pipeline and natural gas distribution industry. Like you said, I recently retired from One Gas and created my own consulting firm. But while I was at One Gas, I was chief engineer, director of asset strategies, director of operations. I was active in the AGA and the OSRAT committee, the regulatory compliance committee, trying to help shape the pipeline industry rules and regulations that we all have to live under. And so I've got a real extensive background in how the pipelines work, how they are designed, how they operate, and able to work well with Bruce on these type of projects.
Craig, you mentioned the changing regulatory environment and the regulatory challenges that they're facing in the pipeline industry. It's one that we all interact with. I can't imagine anybody in this country that's not benefiting from the pipeline industry on a daily basis. But it's not something we hear about quite as much, particularly in the context of BPM, as we do, say, the banking industry going through its massive disruption with Dodd-Frank and the role that the BPM has played in that. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of challenges that the industry is facing and companies like One Gas in particular are faced?
Okay. Yeah, probably one of the most significant changes that's coming about in the pipeline industry is this aging workforce issue. Most of the companies did a lot of downsizing over the last 10, 15 years, and so there's kind of this donut hole of lack of experience. We've got a lot of older people, we've got a lot of younger people, and the older people are all approaching retirement age, and so they're taking that knowledge of the pipeline, knowledge of the system, knowledge of how procedures work, and they're walking out the door with it. And this younger workforce is coming in and hasn't had 10, 15, 20 years of experience in how things operate to be able to do them right without a little bit of help and guidance. The other big thing that is really approaching the industry hard right now is the aging infrastructure. There's a lot of facilities out there that are at or near their life expectancy, and there's a huge amount of pressure right now from the regulatory compliance expectation that these facilities need to be replaced and updated and modernized. And the whole understanding of how you have to document these facilities has dramatically changed, and the amount of data that has to be warehoused and validated and then be able to data mined afterwards is just a huge amount of data. And then finally, the IT shops in almost every one of these firms is a very traditional standard, and so trying unique ideas is kind of difficult for them at times.
Those are really interesting points, and it's funny that it really is analogous to what's happening in many industries, but including banking, as I'd mentioned. Bruce, a question for you. So the last point that Craig had made relative to the cultural norms in IT development shops and in the pipeline industry, and that's one I can appreciate, having worked in some of those industries as a consultant. Bringing in something like BPM can be embraced. It can certainly be transformative, but there's also some inevitable cultural resistance there. When you looked at BPM from your perch in that industry and what you were able to bring in to that, why did you look at BPM as opposed to whatever the off-the-shelf domain-specific applications that might be entrenched in the pipeline industry that would not have faced the same cultural resistance? What was it about BPM that led you to embrace that and take that potential risk that obviously paid off here?
Well, Nathaniel, everybody raises all of the main points here, and while we do follow traditional IT methods quite often, we were in an organization that was very fragmented in terms of its business processes. And many of these organizations go through acquisition, and through acquisition you inherit a diversity or variability in the processes that needed to be addressed. Virtually everything in this business was paper-based. And the processes were ill-defined. They were generally not well understood by any one person. So we needed a new approach, and we needed a solution that was flexible enough to allow us to experiment with process design. That's very key. Yet it was rapid enough that we could get some immediate relief from the problems of a paper-based system as the regulations were beginning to outrun us. So we considered the traditional IT approach. We went through the process of design and what the system might look like, and our corporate IT group put a number on it, and that number was $400,000 for development. And with that money being spent, there was no guarantee that the solution would, in fact, solve our problems, because everybody on the phone, I'm sure, is aware of that process where you design and you develop and you test, and that's a long cycle. And at the end of the cycle, you reevaluate where you are, and sometimes you re-enter the cycle. And so it could take months or years to do what we wanted to do. Plus, we'd already had one failed attempt. So management said, no, we're not going to go that route. So with that path exhausted, management authorized a search for a BPM solution. That search resulted in a contract to develop systems using BPM for two of key processes at the time. So picture this as sort of a prototype project, that the two key services were service installation and operator qualification. Service installation was critical because it was the number one way of serving customers. It's how we brought new customers into our system. OQ was critical for regulatory compliance issues because anybody who does work in the field has to be certified, and this operator qualification system was going to track that certification and make sure that we were in compliance with that. The challenge was we only had a budget of $70,000 to do this proof of concept, if you will, and we had 90 days to go live with it, and we succeeded in both measures. Nathaniel?
Yep. I was pausing because I was blown away, Bruce. Very well done. Craig, just as a follow-up on that, but a lot of your case study really talked about the benefit around customer interaction and the benefit of one gas relative to billing, but I know that there's a fair amount in there that relates to the customer service. That's also, as you enumerated the challenges and what you're going through as an industry, and I was noting the connection there with what several other industries are going through that may seem very dissimilar, but are facing very similar challenges, as you'd noted, aging workforce, infrastructure, beyond aging, down to the heavy data requirements. The real key here for all of these industries and the leverage point for BPM is how do you use that as a leverage point for improving customer service while solving those other problems that may be more on the cost side rather than the value creation side. In this case, the impression I got from reading the case studies is you did do just that. You were able to increase your ability to service customers. Was I reading that right? I mean, how were you able to improve your interaction with customers?
Well, yeah, one of the biggest problems we had was so much of our processes were paper-based. There'd be an order filled out, it'd be on paper, it'd get handed off to someone else, it'd be on paper, it would sit in someone's truck, it would go here, it would go there, and those pieces of paper, inevitably, some would get lost. And so we would either have a situation where a customer didn't get their facilities installed on time, or as they had hoped it to be scheduled, or maybe we did get it installed in time, but we then failed to document properly the material and all the details in it because the piece of paper got lost. And so a solution like this locked these procedures and processes down into a place where our younger, less experienced people didn't lose the processes as they went through. It guided them through it. It made them ask the right questions. It made them document the right things. It made them do the work at the time it was scheduled. It made them get the billing data back so that the documentation could be approved and bills could be sent, that payments could be made. It just, all those things of keeping the process moving with people that were way less experienced at this than the older group was, really made a huge difference in our customer service. The satisfaction that came out of our builder group out of this process was measurable. The results that we got, the improvements in our customer satisfaction, because we were able to deliver as we had promised.
That's a really compelling story, Craig. And if I were to summarize that in kind of general terms and connect it to a misperception about BPM, it's not about simply automating work and taking that work away from human beings. It's about allowing human beings to do their jobs better.
Absolutely.
That's great. Bruce, a question for you. So you talked about the proof of concept, and you obviously had extraordinary success with how you rolled this out cost effectively, seeing great results. When we talked about the metrics, we were talking just in terms of the actual operational improvements. We weren't even getting to the bottom part, the cost side of the ROI, which obviously in this case was quite favorable. But can you give us some more lessons learned around how you approached the research and selection for the BPM solution you looked at? You'd mentioned the POC, but let me kind of take us through the steps and what you learned going through that.
Okay, sure, Nathaniel. As I mentioned earlier, we were given an initial budget of $70,000. The $70,000 was actually above the money we spent during the selection process. And the selection process was fairly involved. Keep in mind, it was 8 years ago that we did this in 2007. So this is pretty early in the whole, genre of BPM. And at the time, there were a ton of players in the field claiming to have a solution. And the list was so long, we grew fatigued just trying to compile a complete list. So we just very quickly created a short list of some of the players that we thought had the best opportunity to make us successful. And we knew the risks of choosing poorly were high, especially given our history with software development using more of a traditional approach. So we really needed to get some quick successes under our belt. When we were looking for a solution, we considered many factors. One was open source. Actually, we had previous experience with open source, so naturally we considered it. We also looked at Java versus Microsoft stack. We looked at large providers and small providers. At the end of the day, our short list was made, and we asked for demonstrations of the various products. The demonstrations, of course, are very structured. Here's a business problem we're going to try to solve, kind of thing. So the initial impressions were very important for us as well. We wanted something that was built for business analysts, not IT professionals, and that shortened the list a great deal because we really wanted our business professionals to be in charge of the processes. And those professionals include a wide range of individuals that represent engineering, customer service, et cetera. And there was a role for IT professionals, but they weren't the principal target users. So we also wanted an easy-to-use, familiar interface. We wanted to demo before we bought anything. Essentially, that drew us into a proof of concept. And finally, we wanted great support because we had talked to a number of vendors in the past, and their support was not adequate for us many times because many of the vendors simply didn't have the resources to provide that kind of support or the market penetration to have a partner network that could provide that support. So that was absolutely crucial to us. And one final thing that we were really looking for, and this was new at the time, we were looking for something that was cloud-based because we had a number of remote users. Most of the users are outside the firewall of the corporate city limits, and we have a number of trading partners and a number of regulatory agencies, all of which we wanted to have access to the system to work collaboratively on our business dealings. So three things really sealed the deal for us, Nathaniel. First, the user interface. I mentioned it before, but the user interface allowed us to develop working software and prototyping it without writing a line of code. That's very important for a business analyst because if they were familiar with Visio, they were, kind of on the road to being trained in this product. They were able to sit in a conference room pilot, develop business processes on the fly like you would with a Visio-type product, and so on. So the interface was absolutely important to us. Second, the proof of concept or the try before you buy gave us an opportunity to lower our risk in terms of purchasing a solution. We could actually see the solution working before we really paid out any money, and that was an important thing. Third, and most importantly, I mentioned it before, the support. It had to be awesome, and without adequate support from the vendor, we knew the project was probably going to draw out and be at risk of failure. So that's really the final thing in terms of the lessons learned is make sure you have adequate support from your supplier.
That's a great point, Bruce. And it's one that I think Craig can relate to as well. Craig, can you take us through some of the other benefits? We were talking about the customer-facing benefits, but what else? How else were the results realized through the benefits that Bruce was talking about from the standpoint of the actual software platform?
Well, I tell you, one of the things that Bruce mentioned in there was the process of mapping out, almost physio-like, to map out the processes. As we were going through that, we discovered some inefficiencies in our existing processes, and we were able to modify our procedures and processes the way that would make things flow better, which also saved us some time and money. And that's one of the benefits that came out of having gone through this process with Bruce. The other part of it I keep coming back to is we bring a lot of inexperienced people into these roles, and because of the way it's now structured, they're able to be successful in their roles because the process guides them through asking the right questions, capturing the correct information. It allows them to be much more successful, and a big part of it is it allows them to be more efficient with their time. If you've got a person out in the field doing his work, and then they have to come back into the office to do their back office side of their work, and in our traditional method, they may have been spending 3 to 4 hours a day in the office getting all their stuff documented and captured properly. Anything, if you can decrease that by as little as an hour and give them an extra hour out in the field, that's a 25% increase in productivity in the field. That's huge. The technology we use in the pipeline side isn't going to give us that kind of efficiency increases. So by freeing up so much of their time to put them out in the field to accomplish their work, it was just huge savings for us.
That's a great point. Bruce, I'd like to shift gears to one of the most common questions that we face with BPM initiatives, which is, underlying this question is, where do you get started? And that's the single biggest issue that we face. How do you pick the right process? So in this case, with one gas, what was the first process you picked, and why did you pick it?
Well, Nathaniel, we had one really nagging issue at one gas at the time, and it was largely due to the paper-based system and the remote nature of the workforce. And that was our service installation process. The service installation is absolutely critical. It's a customer-facing application/process that's essentially how one gas acquires new customers. Remember, one gas is a natural gas utility acquiring customers to purchase their natural gas. Is what the service installation is all about. And the service installation is actually connecting the gas distribution system to homes and businesses and so forth. So imagine, if you will, you build a house, you need natural gas service. What you need is service installation in our terminology. In this process, service installation, you have a number of stakeholders to the process. You have contractors, which do most of the field work. You have their crews. You have inspectors. They could be company inspectors, contract inspectors. They could be state inspectors. You have locators. Locators are the guys who locate the existing underground infrastructure to help avoid damages. All these people collaborate in the installation of piping to deliver natural gas to your home. So that's basically how that works. Since going live, we've installed more than 300,000 of these services, and we've paid contractors more than $83 million U.S. dollars for their services to install them, because part of the process is actually a bill payment feature, which we built into our solution as well. During this time, we've installed 3.6 million meters or 12 million feet of pipeline. So it's a big number. It's a big impact. In retrospect, this was one of the most difficult processes that we have, and was probably not an ideal choice from one perspective. However, it was also the most nagging process at the time, and it was where we thought the biggest benefits were really going to come. And it served the purpose of establishing the credibility that we needed to move forward with other processes. There was a second process, though, that we implemented at the same time. The second process is called operator qualification. Each person performing tasks at a job site are required to be certified to perform those tasks. Those tasks might be something as simple as locating underground facilities or doing some sort of a fusion from one pipe to another, sort of a weld kind of process. But they have to be certified. If the work is done by a non-certified person, that work must be redone, and in many cases, that by the time that's discovered, the work is buried and everybody has moved on. And we've had instances where as many as 250 pieces of such work had to be reworked and because of expired certifications. Hence the need for operator qualifications, or we call it OQ. Because of the cost and liability concerns, OQ was selected to go live at the same time as service installation, because we wanted to be able to link the process of service installation back to OQ such that nobody doing a service installation could accomplish that work if they were not OQ qualified, if that makes sense. So the two systems are essentially talking to each other. So within our solution, no work was done in service installation that couldn't be done by anyone not OQ qualified. And with an average cost of $1,000 per service, you can imagine if you had to rework 250 pieces of work, I mean, the savings are quite substantial, Nathaniel.
Sure. Well, that's very compelling. So, and I'm going to invite Craig to join in this follow-up question. So that was the first process. What happened next? What were the next processes that you looked at?
Would you like me to go first, Nathaniel?
Sure. Why don't you kick it off, and then Greg, jump in as you see fit.
Okay. There were a lot of choices to choose from, or opportunities at the time, and but there were a couple of things that we really wanted to focus on here in terms of that. We had a lot of processes, but a lot of processes are maybe one or two activities. So they're very short processes. We tended to build those in a modular fashion so that within the structure of a much larger process, such as service installation or what have you, such as OQ, for example, we could insert OQ as a sub-process within service installation. So we had lots and lots of those built in modular fashion. But what we did focus on a number of big ones, and one of the big ones that we did focus on was damage investigation and prevention. In the USA, preventing pipeline damage and lessening its impact on public safety is a huge issue, which Craig can attest to. In fact, that's one of his mantras going forward, is working in that area to help prevent future damages. To that end, it was important for us to efficiently and effectively investigate each damage with an eye to preventing future damages. So essentially what we're doing is trying to replace the paper-based damage investigation system that was just fraught with all kinds of omissions and errors with a computerized version where we controlled the process, the handoffs, the paper flow, and all those things. And with an eye to preventing future damages. And that's not just a good practice, but it's the law in the United States. So our damage investigation and prevention process is by far the most complex we've automated so far. It involves collecting all damage-related information real-time from the field, plus interviewing all stakeholders, determining the condition of facilities, calculating the cost of repairs, and it's all approved by corporate legal because at the end of the day, everything that's collected falls into the hands of corporate legal for their decision-making. The end result is a comprehensive store of damage-related information that damage prevention managers can access at any time. Everything from locates to what they call at fault or people or reasons damages occur. So they're able to do these kinds of studies with an eye towards prevention. From this store, they can identify the top reasons for damage, for example, as well as the top perpetrators or persons responsible, and they can take corrective actions to prevent future incidents, which might be a change in policy or procedures, training opportunities, etc. And I might also mention, Nathaniel, where there's damage, there are repair costs. And the number one concern, of course, is public safety when there is a damage, but the repair costs are substantial. Notably, the repair costs have averaged $1.2 million per year for the last 5 years for one gas. Using Sequence, we can readily assign that responsibility for the repair and have the evidence to process it through the legal system so that we can move towards collecting against those costs. Because of this, we've seen substantial improvements in our collection cycles.
Yeah, Bruce, you were talking about damage prevention being so important. In the pipeline safety world, 35+% of all incidents and failures result from third-party damage. So this was a huge issue for us in the industry. And one of the things that your software, your solution brought to us was it helped our people get better at doing what they do, because if you had a really experienced person that came out there, they knew what to gather. They knew how to capture the right information. They knew which questions to ask so that the engineer back in the field could do the right calculations. But when you had this whole infrastructure, aging workforce thing that we've got going on, we had so many new people that wouldn't necessarily know to capture the right information. And this is incredibly hard to recreate 2 weeks later. It's easy to get while you're out there, but it's impossible to get after it's gone. And so this solution helped our people become more efficient at what they were doing and pull all that stuff together in the right sequence and at the right time when it was still available.
Craig raises good points there. Let me throw out some numbers, Nathaniel. We actually reduced our cycle times in damage investigations by almost 2/3, down from 66 days to 26 days. That's only since record keeping began. Remember, it was a completely paper process prior to that, and so it's very difficult to have metrics from, the BC period. But since then, we've reduced, like I say, the cycle time by 2/3, and that's very important. We also reduced the maximum billing time. So the worst case scenario, we would complete the cycle from investigation to collection or whatever in 800 days. We reduced that to 125 days. So we've gone from years to months in terms of that cycle time. And as a side note, we've increased the collection time or the collection amount. The average collection per damage when we first began was $334 US dollars. Now it's $1,144. So it's a 300% gain in the amount of collection dollars, which saves the ratepayers tremendous amounts of money.
That's a great point. And as I mentioned at the outset, it really is a compelling story. It's one that really makes the case for BPM. Not only the benefits for one gas, but these are the sorts of processes and problems that are being faced by a number of industries and a number of organizations. So we're going to switch gears now. Now that you've sufficiently whetted our appetite, I'm going to have James join in and actually show us the product. So James, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay, thank you, Nathaniel. Bruce, Craig, thank you for that very interesting insight into how you're using Sequence. I've been working with Bruce since 2007. I was back there in those early days when he selected PNMsoft Sequence, and it's been a pleasure working with Bruce for these many years since. And I just wanted to show the audience in a little more detail PNMsoft Sequence, the product that they selected back in 2007 and have been using since to deliver the sorts of business benefits that I've just been talking about. So first of all, I'm not going to do too many slides. Just a very quick introduction to PNMsoft, very quick introduction to Sequence, and then we'll have just a very quick look at the product to give you a feel for how did they achieve the sorts of returns that they were just talking about. So PNMsoft, we're a Microsoft-based business process management software vendor. It's all we do. We don't do lots of other things, and BPM is just one of our sidelines. It's what we focus on. We focus on the product, creating as good a BPM product as possible, but we're very customer centric. Hopefully you got a feel from Bruce there. We support our customers. We value our customers' success, and we don't just say that as a sales message that you then never hear once you become one of our customers. To us, the customer is key. And our product sequence helps you to be able to support that idea for your customers as well. A successful company values its customers. And so Sequence, it is a Microsoft-based BPM. We view it as one of the leading products in the market. I'm going to show you when we actually look at the product some of the benefits that Bruce and Craig both mentioned. But in any large organization, we sort of see two different types of business process. And on the screen here, you can see hot processes. What's a hot process? Now, some processes are just standard and don't change very often. You want to automate them, and then you can leave them alone, and they will just run forever. But more often than not, the unique processes, the differentiators that make one gas and many other large organizations different to their competitors are these hot processes. Ones that they might even need to change on a daily basis, can change regularly, whether that's changing the process, but also perhaps what resources are available to those processes. What's the priority of cases coming in? What skills do our workforce have? How can we apply the right skills to the right steps in the process? Craig was mentioning, a new workforce coming in that doesn't have many years of experience. How can we capture those people that do have the skills and make sure that the skilled tasks are done by the right people? We call these hot processes, and Sequence is architected to allow you to be able to optimize the cost of the transaction of those hot processes. Bruce just mentioned how they had managed to increase revenue, reduce costs significantly. Sequence is the key to that, and it helps do that. Now, of course, it's not just about the technology. It's about you being able to take your knowledge, take your experience, and to be able to automate the process. So here, just very quickly, the key there, and you've heard it in the case study, being able to capture the process, the model initially, to be able to understand exactly how it needs to work. For business analysts to be able to capture in Sequence what that process is. If you've got to write a document and then hand it over to IT for IT to then code it, then there's going to be something lost in translation. So the key is the business analyst being able to own the process. And then being able to enrich that, to configure and then deploy the process that then allows the end user to be able to execute the process. While it's executing, gathering lots of good management information, analytics, statistics, that then allow you to understand, okay, we're laying a pipeline. How can we make it more efficient? How can we reduce our cost? How can we increase our revenue? Being able to see within your processes where you can refine them. And then having the tools to be able to analyze that information. And more importantly, then being able to optimize your process. Being able to introduce small processes. At PNMsoft, we have a concept called Evolutionary BPM. Again, Nathaniel touched on this, about which process do you start with. We don't recommend starting with, I've got 200 processes I want to automate. Let's automate those and go with a big bang. Let's choose an excellent candidate process, get that automated, get it deployed. Then move on to the next one. Continue improving our process, continue automating new processes. Taking very small steps, but then ultimately reaching a big change. And our Evolutionary BPM methodology is based on the Agile Scrum methodology, allowing you to very quickly be able to make changes to your process, both as you're developing it, but also once you've deployed it, being able to refine it, possibly trying things and then rolling them back if they're not quite working. But ultimately, being able to fine-tune your business to really drive down costs, increase revenue. So let's have a look at exactly what we mean by all this. And so here I'm going to just very quickly, we've only got a few minutes left, a very quick look at PNMsoft Sequence. One of the reasons why Sequence was chosen by Bruce was its usability. We have a very simple user interface based on Microsoft technologies, therefore it's a desktop that is very familiar with the end users. But it's all browser-based, making it perfect for cloud deployments. It means those staff out in the field can stay out in the field. They don't need to come into the office. You can create a very rich user experience, very simple user experience, whatever you want. You can create it using SharePoint, as why I have here an excellent Microsoft portal. Or if you don't want to use Microsoft Sequence, you can create your own portals. Very quick, very easy to be able to create this, to create the user experience that you want for your end users. And a process is started by a number of ways. It could be started by a human, it could be started by an event happening in another system. So we have excellent integration to other systems. People are key in sequence processes, but integration with other systems is also key as well, to provide information to the user so that they can do their job in an informed way. Particularly if they are less experienced, providing them with support, with knowledge support, so that they can action the jobs very quickly. I've just very quickly here started a service request process. A process we see many of our customers using. It's about your customer needs you to do something. And so here I may be in the front office, I may be a field engineer who's talking to a customer and wanting to start a process. I can capture the details about the customer. Here, this isn't coming from Sequence. I don't want to hold my list of customers in Sequence. I want to hold them in the CRM system, for instance, and then show that list in Sequence. And for the customer I choose, who are the authorized contacts. All this information, easy to select, but easy for me to then be able to use. On our web forms, we can have drop-downs of lists to make sure that people select from a specific set of options. We can have text areas. Any piece of information, it could be a priority, can help drive the process, can help drive the SLAs that you run your process to. We can upload documents. We can show grids of information coming from other systems. Here, we're pulling information potentially from many different systems and presenting it to the user in one place, so they don't have to switch to many different systems. And of course, form validation to make sure the data that is entered is of good quality and is complete. Let's have a new pipeline. And I don't have to think, okay, so I'm filling in this form, what do I do with it now? All of that logic is taken care of by Sequence. We'll have a look at the process flow in a moment and how we define that. But here what's key, I talked about prioritization, making sure skills can be taken into account. Here the process has been sent to a service management team, just one of the ways that we can allocate work out. This is a team, we don't mind who does this, we just want someone to do this. We could have a service management team of 20, but only these 3 are qualified to lay a particular pipeline or to action a particular job, whatever it may be that you have within your organization. You can target who receives work down to a very granular level. So I've submitted my request. At any point, I can come in and I can view where my particular request is. It's here in my list of processes, and I can see it in a visual manner. This is the same diagram that we have in the design environment. We're not going to have time to go into the design environment in a lot of detail today, but here I can see, okay, the service engineer has submitted the request. It's now paused on the service manager processing that request, determining what needs to happen. I can log out as myself, and I can log in as Tom, who is the service manager. So Tom can be sitting at his desk with his portal open, and in a moment, in will pop a new task that he has to do. He sees it here as a message within the portal. We can push it to him as an email, we can send it to his mobile, however it's appropriate for him to be able to action it. at the moment is still read-only. He can fetch the task off the queue. His teammates don't need to worry about it now. He can now action the task. And in life, business processes aren't always as simple as A, B, and C. Sometimes you need to allow the user to be able to use their experience, to be able to decide what happens next. Of course, in certain processes, you want them to be very structured, but sometimes you may want to allow some ad hoc elements to be done. And so in this case, if I can spell rightly, perform survey. There's lots of things that we may want to do in this request for a new pipeline. And we can decide who's going to do this work. We can provide them with lots of instructions. I'll only do the one for now, but we can add as many steps here as we want, ad hoc steps in this process. And we then submit this. Now behind the scenes, if you'd have been very sharp-eyed, you'd have seen there was a decision point in the process. Is this a chargeable request? Do we need to get approval? And if we do, we need to go to an appropriate person for that approval. So we can have levels of authority, certain levels needing to go higher up the chain, get the appropriate approval so that the work can then proceed. But we don't need to, Tom doesn't need to worry about, okay, who do I need to go to? Okay, in this case, it's up to this value. I need to contact Jane. All of that logic is taken care of for them, making it easy for the users. They can focus on their job in hand and then move on to the next task. For Jane, she's a very busy lady. She's a service director. She may use our portal. We may find she's out and about. She could be out in the fielding. She could be out visiting sites, talking to new customers. She can action the work from the portal. Or more likely, she may use her email. Here, in a moment, in will pop an email. There we go. So we can send her an email, whether that's in Outlook, on a smartphone, on her tablet, and we can tell her all the details about this particular request. And she can have a link to the task to very quickly then be able to action it, to be able to see everything that's going on and give her approval. Or even if she's very busy, we have one click in here. She can review the details. I'm happy with that. On her smartphone, click approved, job done, move on to the next task. It's about reducing the human latency, but still keeping control of the process. Very quickly, let's have a little look at, well, how can we provide visibility on these processes? It's not just about automating the process, it's about understanding how they perform. So we have very rich dashboarding capabilities that we can filter on, that we can drill down on, that we can provide SLA bandings on to give us a very quick high-level view of how the process is performing. We don't need to worry about this KPI. We don't need to worry about this KPI that's showing as green. This one's showing it red. Let's look at this. Let's focus on this. Allows us to focus on what's important. And finally, in this very quick whistle-stop tour through sequence, Bruce mentioned it earlier, it's about business analysts, even business users, being able to work with the process designer to come up with the automated solution. Here we are in the Sequence App Studio, where you can create these business process applications, but in a way that the business analyst can create the process, can even create many of the forms behind here. We have a UX Studio that's very simple to use. We have a business rules engine that's very simple to use. This is our UX Studio. You can create templates that have your standard look and feel, so every form that everyone creates looks exactly the same. Business rules are easy to create. Even integration is very easy to create. Lots more that I can say, but I'm over my time already, so I'll be in trouble with Nathaniel. So at that point, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I shall pass back to Nathaniel for him to wrap up.
Great. Thank you very much, James. And as James just said, we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. You'll see there the opportunity to ask questions. If we don't get to your questions during this session, we will follow up. All questions will be answered, maybe just not in the next 8 minutes. But to start with, we have the first few that have come in. This one is for Craig. After Craig speaks to it, Bruce, you may want to take it on, but let me put it to Craig first. From your perspective, what advice can you give companies that are struggling to adapt to their processes as well as their systems to the challenges that you've mentioned at the outset?
Well, I think, part of it is one of the keys that was mentioned early on is that business analyst that helps you work through the process. It's got to be someone that is going to get involved in understand the workflows that are out there, because every process has a workflow. But if you listen to your people, sometimes they tell you what the real workflow is, and sometimes they tell you what maybe the workflow is. And so that analyst really has to dig into it to see how they're actually doing their work. That's probably one of the bigger keys.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is one of the perennial challenges in any kind of process transformation, but also it's for BPM, where you have the as is, the to be, and the how it's really done. The latter is often the most mysterious and hardest to discover. So having a strong architect and analyst involved is key. Having the right tools and an approach certainly helps. Bruce, both you and James talked about the underlying methodology that comes with PNMsoft. You had also talked about the fact that you'd moved towards agile development and adopted the agile methodology. Were there any particular lessons learned around that?
Sorry, Nathaniel, so was that question for me?
That was actually for Bruce, but James, perhaps you can start with that, and then Bruce can follow up.
Yep, certainly. We've adopted it mainly because we've always done an agile approach, but before agile has really come to the forefront, and we've always recommended a phased approach, an evolutionary BPM approach. But we're now seeing many of our customers are wanting to run the projects this way. It's really returning real value to the customers, allowing to be able to automate their processes quickly and effectively, and deliver results to their customers, their business users. So we're seeing huge value with agile methodologies. Bruce, do you have anything to add to that? I think we might have lost Bruce there.
We have lost Bruce. As we move on, Craig, I got a follow-up question that would be appropriate for you. If you have anything to add relative to agile specifically, that would be interesting. But the follow-up question is just around the getting started part, and what advice do you have on getting started?
Well, a couple of the things that James mentioned, I experienced in one of previous companies is start small. Pick the projects, and don't try and start and totally transform the entire company all at one time. Pick your projects, go through your iterations, get them working better, and then roll out the next one and the next one and the next one. Working on this type of solution has really helped us, because the mapping out of the workflows through the BPM solution was what really helped us get efficiencies in how we do things, making sure things move correctly. And so by picking off the pieces of it and improving each of those as we rolled out the additional sections, it just made everything go so much more smoothly.
Yeah, okay, great, Bruce. Glad to have you back. So we were talking about the lessons learned from implementing Agile, and that was one that James had spoken to. But I don't know if you have anything to add on that from your standpoint of making that transition to adopting the Agile methodology.
Yes, Nathaniel, let me mention a couple of things that kind of dive a little bit deeper on this evolutionary BPM methodology that we've come up with. As James mentioned, everybody's on tighter budgets and tighter timelines, and we had to change our approach in order to make it successful. And one of the ways we did that was by accelerating the iteration of cycles in terms of design, development, deploy kind of thing. And we talked about the user interface as an example. If you know Visio, you're halfway there. James showed it to you on the screen. Very intuitive. Business users can drag and drop business processes on the fly. Craig mentioned sometimes they tell you what the process is, sometimes they tell you what they think it is or what you want to hear. Well, by using this methodology and this tool set, we're able in a conference room environment to map that process and actually execute it hands-on, essentially driving live software right there before their eyes. And that has a huge impact on validating what exactly is this process, what are the handoffs, who are the people involved, what are its inputs, outputs, et cetera. So that whole approach was very important to us. And because we're doing it all through the cloud, the technology is largely hidden. It's just a matter of deploying a process, design, testing that design, keeping the good parts and discarding the bad parts, and performing that cycle over and over with more and more speed, such that you, in effect, you're designing, coding, testing, training in very, very small increments. And through that, we think that the process is improved in an evolutionary sort of way. And that's how we've come up with this particular concept.
That's very well put, Bruce. There's a follow-up question that is apropos of just that. And the question is whether or not, and it's asked in terms of the software. So there's that dimension, but there's also, from your perspective, how you've actually applied it. So whether or not it supports the lean methodology, which, as you know, is an increasingly popular, particularly in public sector, approach to process optimization. And there is sort of an inherent link between that and what you're describing about how you do incremental transformation and improvement. Are you familiar enough with lean methods to speak to that as it relates to what you did and how you were able to leverage PNMsoft?
This is Bruce. Yes, we do have some familiarity with that process, and a few things that the software really provided us that helped us a lot, and we continue to leverage on these strengths, is the huge amount of analytics or metrics that we're able to glean from the system. For example, at one point in time, OneGas was implementing this statistics-based continuous improvement system. And in order to do the studies for the statistics, you have to have the data to support that. And Craig also mentioned early on the importance of huge amounts of data and being able to process that. We're able to do that within the sequence system. For example, every single workflow has a start and end time. Every single activity within a workflow has a start and an end time. So you're able to draw from the system very key metrics in terms of your cycle times. Where are my process bottlenecks? What if I modify the process on the fly using hot change technology to try a different design, and then I can remeasure, if you will, the improvement in that particular change, and I can easily roll back that change if the improvements don't pan out. So within the tool set, there's tons and tons of data that will support almost any analytical approach to process optimization.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, so out of respect for time, we're going to end there. Thank you all for joining us, and especially thank you, our speakers, Bruce, Craig, and James. Well done.